The lesson tonight is Trusting God in the Dark, Act 1. Well, when I saw that immediately, I thought, well, the next week will be Christmas, and so I thought it would be the week after Christmas that they'd have Act 2. This is the lesson 3, but they don't have Act 2 until the lesson 7. So I don't know. They're going back the chronology of Isaiah, but that's an interesting little situation. There's 30 chapters between Act 1 here and Act 2. So I just kind of, but anyway, the key verse is not in our passage of lesson right now. This time it's, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." And that's a promise. That's a strong promise. There's some people that can tell you, well, we'll be there, and they probably mean it, but then they can't. Because they're human, and the body will go weak on them. And sometimes it could be, you might be on your way to church and somebody pull out from a red light in front of you, and you might not make it to church. You might live, but you might not make it to church, And it could be that you might not even come out of that. But he said, don't fear, for I'm with thee. And a thing comes to me, there's nothing in the lesson here, I guess, but talking about God delivering. I like the 3 Hebrew children. When Nebuchadnezzar said, "If you don't bow when the music starts, I'm throwing you in this fire," they said, "No, king. We're not careful to answer you in this matter." He said, "Our God can deliver us from that fire. But if not, we're still not going to bow to your idol." Because, and I'll say this about them, they must not have been Sadducees. They must have believed in the resurrection. Because if they didn't believe in the resurrection, we better stay here, for a while. But they must have believed in the resurrection. And then one of the pertinent principles here, I looked at this and I liked it real well. If we look down, we only see defeat and discouragement. If we bow down, we see Christ in victory. There's a difference between looking down and bowing down. And that's the way I thought I'd throw those things in before we got into the lesson very much. And I tried to check out a little bit about Ahaz. I didn't have a lot of time in a way because there's some busyness and things that I'm doing. But a lot of times I would get Ahaz and Ahab mixed up. Ahaz wasn't the best of kings, but Ahab was one of the worst. He was one of the worst. Yeah, and his wife Jezebel. If he couldn't do the bad, well, she'd do it for him. I mean, I don't mean to get too stuff that's not in the lesson, but he went home. He saw a vineyard, and the guy said, "It's been in my family for years, and I'm not going to sell it to you." No, he went home and pouted. And Jezebel says, "Aren't you the king of Israel? And you can't get what you want? I'll get it for you." And she set Naboth up and they falsely accused him of a bunch of stuff and stoned him, and then it could be the kings. Wow, But anyway, the lesson text is Isaiah chapter 7, and I guess 1 through 9. And so, starting with the first verse there, "And it came to pass the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up toward Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. And it was told the house of David, saying, Syria is confederate with Ephraim. And if you look through your lesson, Ephraim here is about the same as Israel, because Ephraim was the dominant tribe in that part of the country, in that kingdom. They were the largest tribe, and so forth. And then it says, and his heart was moved, Ahaz's heart was moved, and the heart of his people, as the trees of the wood are moved with the wind. We've seen a lot of wind the last 3 or 4 years. The trees just, I think Linda says she has some in the back of her house, and sometimes she wonders about them. I got a picture of one there close to my house. I guess the trunk is about this big around. It's a beech tree, and it's just cracked. Oh, buddy, the wind, that's what that means here. I noticed this, that before we get into some of the commentary, when the northern kingdom, you remember when they split under Rehoboam? Rehoboam had this idea to go bring them back under control and keep the kingdom united, but the prophets told him, no, don't do that. This is the way it's going to be, and not to have any war with the northern kingdom of Israel. And he didn't. But here it's the other way around. They're trying to attack the southern kingdom, the house of David. And there's a pattern. We talk sometimes about the prophecies. When we think of Gentiles, when we think of prophecies, things that's happening in the past, Israel a lot of times considers a pattern of things and how that'll indicate what's coming. And this is a pattern. The enemies from the north here, and in prophecy, in the tribulation, the kingdoms from the north. Different kingdoms we're talking about here, but it's from the north. And you go Judah, then you go north to Israel, you go north to Syria, then you keep going further north to Assyria. In fact, it's kind of like a angle, just directly north of Israel, of Judah is, and then you go to Syria, which is bigger than Israel, but then Assyria is even bigger than Syria was. And Assyria is the kingdom, essentially, that Nimrod started, the way I understand it. It's, and I was over watching some video. Better you get started in the lesson if I'm going to get it done. But we're still listening, watching some videos of Chuck Missler, and there was 5 kingdoms in the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had. And most prophecy teachers and so forth will talk about those 5 kingdoms. But we couldn't actually find that particular graph. But on one underneath that, in this particular graph, was Israel, and Israel was there the whole time. And on top, it seemed that the kingdom of Syria was there all the time. That makes 7 kingdoms. And the kingdom of Assyria more or less represents the spiritual Babylon, and the spirit that's of the Antichrist, and the kingdom of the beast that'll come during the tribulation. Again, there's a pattern and a repetition of things and so forth. Well, let's see. To picture what was happening here, one might need to look at a Bible map for this period. Israel was Judah's closest neighbor to the north. I kind of covered that a little bit. Still further north was Syria. Beyond that was Assyria, so forth. Syria had formed an alliance with Ephraim. Israel had formed an alliance to try to withstand Assyria's encroachment into their lands. But John Oswald thinks and suggests that it's possible that King Ahaz of Judah has reached out to Assyria to form an alliance of his own, so he could be protected from the alliance of Syria and Ephraim, as in Israel. The opening words here were simply a summary of what could happen, or what would happen. However, in the expanded account of which follows, this outcome was not clear to the people of Judah. From their perspective, their nation was hanging by a very thin thread. There is a lot of times that we look at things and we say, well, I don't see how we're going to get through this. But if you remember the the promises that God made to David about the kingdom of Judah. He said, "They're not, in so many words, they'll not fail to be a son of David on the throne in Judah, and it'll be a one forever." And it ends up that it is, because Jesus Christ is a descendant of David. Mary and Joseph were descendants of David, and they don't have a king right now. I don't even know if they have a constitution in Israel. But it won't be long till they'll have a king. It might be a little more than 7 years, and I'm saying 7 years because of the tribulation. But when Jesus comes and sets up his throne, they won't need a constitution, because he'll be the rule. He'll be the law. Anyway, because of the promises that God made to David. And I guess they might have kind of forgotten that a little bit. It's getting kind of thin now. And it's been, I don't know how many generations that Ahaz was from David. But it's always, now the kingdom of Israel, they changed houses. When the servants finally threw Jezebel out the window and she died, Jehu took over as king, and he wasn't Ahab's son by any means, but that's not the case in Israel, in Judah, the house of David. Let's see, verse 2: like a strong wind sweeping through the forest, causing even the strongest of trees to bend and sway, the entire nation of Judah was shaken by the news that Syria and Israel had combined their military resources to invade the nation of Judah and seize control of their capital city of Jerusalem. The fact that they specifically attempted to take Jerusalem indicates that this was no mere duel in the desert, nor was it simply a battle along the border. This was a massive military operation which threatened the complete collapse of their government and their statehood. They were in danger of becoming, at best, a puppet regime under the control of the neighboring powers. It is probably difficult for most of us to fully appreciate how traumatic this situation was for the people of Judah. Most of us have only lived in a nation with overall superior military force and with no imminent threat of a major invasion from a foreign army. We've never had that. The only wars that's been on this continent and on our soil has been the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Even the Spanish-American War that was on the Texas-Mexican border, really didn't get into the United States. And I'm talking about especially like the Texas battle for Revolution and so forth in those days. And a lot of the Spanish-American War, later on, it wasn't here in the confines of the United States. I think it included Cuba and so forth, but I don't know much about the Spanish-American War. At least it's not coming to me right now. But most of the time, we've not had war here in the United States, and we don't know we have no idea what it's like. The imagery of Isaiah's word conjures up a feeling of heart-stopping terror, which swept over even the bravest and strongest of people in Judah. Now, Judah and Israel both, they had seen armies come in and take things, and they just, there's the Midianites and the Moabites and several of these, they would come in and just take the crop sometimes and go back. They'd leave some destruction. I'm thinking about, I don't know which one it was that it was, but when they were burying Elisha, there was a band, I think it was Midianites, that was coming to try to steal and raid some things. And they just hurriedly threw Elisha in the tomb, and And the man that was in the tomb that had been dead there, he got up and walked out. And the Midianites turned around and went back home real quick because they didn't know how they knew there's something there that they weren't wanting to deal with. But the reality of darkness, and then the hope in darkness, and there'll be some things here as well for the last two verses will deal with, or somewhere maybe in this one. About the no, that'll be next week. It'll be next week. It's still in the same chapter here, but the promise of the Savior coming. But I'm thinking here about in John, the light shined in darkness. When Jesus was born, the light shone through all that darkness. There's a hope there. Whenever I've heard a lot of stories, a lot of different things about people traveling, it's nighttime. And they see a light out there. That means something to them. Especially if they're close to their home, and that must be home. Or they're in a storm, and there could be a sanctuary there. It's a hope. Just even when you see the light, some light out there, it's a hope. And since I'm thinking about it, I'll say this. In the very first part of Pilgrim's Progress, Pilgrim was really concerned because he lived in the city of destruction. And he'd read the book about how it was going to be destroyed, and he didn't know which direction to go. He was out in the field. He didn't know where to go. The evangelist come to him and was talking to him a little bit. And he said, I think the gate, first of all, across the field. He couldn't see the gate, the straight and narrow gate. He couldn't see it. There was maybe another thing or two that the evangelist said, could you see? And Christian Pilgrim couldn't see it. But the evangelist finally said, do you see yonder shining light? Pilgrim said, I think I do. The evangelist says, keep that light in your eye. You'll be going the right direction. That's a hope. We see that light, and we keep our eyes on that light, which is the light of the world, Jesus Christ. Then said the Lord unto Isaiah, go forth now to meet Ahaz, thou, and Shear-Jashub, thy son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool, in the highway of the fuller's field. And say unto him, take heed and be quiet. Fear not, neither be faint-hearted, for the two tails of these smoking firebrands, for the fierce anger of Rezin with Syria and of the son of Remaliah, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have taken counsel against thee, saying, let us go unto Jerusalem and vex it, and let us make a breach therein for us, and set a king in the midst of it, even the son of Tabeel. Thus saith the Lord God, it shall not stand, neither shall it come to pass. Hey, there was another time that God told Isaiah to go to Hezekiah when Assyria was there. And Sennacherib was the king, and I forget the general's name, but he was out there blaspheming the God of Israel. Said, y'all's God ain't no different than any of the other gods of these other cities that we've come up against, and that we burned them in the fire. We've destroyed them. Y'all ain't. But Isaiah told him, Hezekiah, that God said, they'll not even shoot an arrow here. And they didn't. Not only that, but in one night, the angel of the Lord went through their camp, and 180,000 were dead by morning. One angel, 185,000 men. I don't want to be on the army that fights God. I just don't want to be that. All right, verse 3. And God's instructions were specific. Not only did he tell Isaiah what he should say, but he also instructed where to go and who to bring with him. Prophets have that kind of a thing with God. Saul, the son of Kish, lost some donkeys. And he was out looking for them, him and a servant of his. God told Samuel, the king there by his once going to be coming through the gate of the city here in a little bit. You stand here and wait for him. Saul didn't know really who Samuel was. But when Samuel saw Saul, that's something you can say 3 or 4 times, 6 or 8 times real fast if you want to. But he said, "You come with me, and finally Saul understood that this was the prophet. And Saul said, "Yeah, your donkeys are found. Don't worry about that. But I got something I want to do. I got a message for you." And he took him outside the city and anointed him to be king. And God told Samuel, this is the guy. And this is another case of telling the prophet to go to a certain place. Saul likely found King Ahaz checking the conduit to access Israel's water supply in anticipation of the cities being cut off from the outside supplies during the imminent siege by Israel and Syria. Hezekiah, Ahaz's son, solved this problem by having an underground tunnel bring water into the city, and they couldn't stop that. But the bringing of his son, Shear-Jashub, was not incidental. There was a symbolic message which Shear-Jashub's presence would also convey. They put that on 2 lines, and that threw me a little bit. The name Shear-Jashub means a remnant shall return. This had serious implications for the long-term picture of Judah's future, but also it offered hope that the Lord, their covenant-keeping God, would not forsake them, not now, nor in the more distant future. Again, as I said before, because of the promises to David, that David would always have a son on the throne. Verse 4, anyone who has watched a fireplace or wood stove can picture the moment when the wood is almost consumed and only the ends of a long piece of wood remain. Especially if you've been camping in the outside, you can have a fire in that fire. If you don't keep pushing those long pieces into the fire, it'll just go out and it'll just smoke. You got to keep pushing them in. And pretty soon you'll see 5 or 6 sticks out here, but nothing's burning because the stuff inside's burned up. That's what that means there. But I kind of think that it also means these people are hot on themselves. They think they're going to really tear it up, but don't worry about that. It ain't going to last. Such was Isaiah's vivid description of Judah's invaders. But like Judah, they were in a desperate geopolitical situation and would succumb to the overwhelming power of the Assyrians. In other words, it was going to happen to Israel before it happened to Judah. In verse 5 and 6 here it says, on the one hand, Judah may not have been completely innocent in this particular crisis. As noted above, or before, Ahaz may have brought this upon his nation by reaching out to the Assyrians and thus posing a threat to his close neighbors. Although this might have seemed politically shrewd, from God's perspective, it revealed a lack of faith in him and his covenant with his people. I think I got a book, I got a Bible that I'm trying to get to my little girl Stella. And I think that Ahaz went also to Egypt. At least maybe it was another time, because he wanted to have an affinity with Egypt and Assyria and himself. And it was against the Assyrians. It was another time. And Pharaoh said, yeah, together, he said, together we can defeat them. And when the Assyrians came, the Egyptians didn't show up. And the Assyrians kind of put some out there, I think, to block them from getting there. But notice, and it says, where it said, and set a king in the midst of it, that Israel and Assyria's intention was to overthrow the current government in Judah and set up a king of their own choosing. Even if Judah had been unfaithful and unbelieving, God still could not allow his promise to the house of David to be broken. In other words, there wasn't going to be another king on that throne. There was not going to be another king on that throne. And the same goes today in a sense. There's all these different organizations and countries want to destroy Israel and kind of, quote, cast them into the sea, but it ain't going to happen. No, because God says, my people will be here. This seems to be the driving reason for God's intention on Judah's behalf. See also verse 13 where he addressed Ahaz with, O house of David. If he was going to do this on account of Ahaz's credentials, it probably wouldn't have worked too good. But David was called a friend of God. And at least a man after God's own heart is what I'm trying to say. And so therefore, he keeps referring to David rather than any of his sons that might not have been exactly everything they should have been. Even some of David's immediate sons, they were Absalom and some of those that they weren't very good. God offered Ahaz a fresh opportunity to trust in him and his word. In spite of his past unbelief and disobedience, he could choose to turn to the Lord and rely on his word in this crisis. That is the real test here. God did not ask Ahaz to ignore reality or to do nothing. Rather, he challenged him to believe his word. Believe what I'm going to do. And around Easter time, we sing a song that 4 days late. I don't know if that's the title of it, but even when he's 4 days late, he's on time. When he went to the tomb of, I think we sing it around Easter time, but it's when he went to the tomb of Lazarus. Oh, you're late. You're late. If you'd have come, you could have healed him. Well, that's true, but he had greater things in mind. Lazarus come forth, and he came forth. Yeah. And then the danger of darkness. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. And that's the king of the place, I think. And then within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, and that it shall not be a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, that's the capital city. And the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son, that's reference to the king. If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. And here he's talking directly to Ahaz and not to the house of Israel or the house of David. In other words, if Ahaz would have believed on the Lord, it might have been a little different story there. But it wasn't. In these verses, God described exactly what would happen. And we now know that it came to pass just as God had said. In 722 BC, Samaria fell to the Assyrians. Not the Syrians, but the Assyrians. This would have been only about 8 years after the prophecy. Wow, that was pretty quick. And however, the prophecy went much further than just predicting the fall of Israel and Assyria. God declared that Ephraim shall be broken, that it not be a people. The period of 65 years would have extended into Israel's time in captivity. Their dispersion among the Gentiles would cause many of them to lose their identity altogether. The Samaritans are not always considered now to be Israelites because they intermarried with the Assyrians. And they've always been looked down on by the Orthodox Jews. And I'll say this at this point in time, but most of you know that if a Jew was in Judah, down around Jerusalem, and he wanted to go to Galilee, he could just go straight north. But he'd have to go through the Samaritan country. So he'd cross the Jordan River, and go up the other side, which was not near as easy to travel, then cross the Jordan again or the Sea of Galilee to get to Galilee. They didn't even want to go through there. And that was one reason it's important when it says Jesus said, I must go through Galilee. Well, it must be something important. Really, had to be really something important. And it was. It was quite important. The salvation of maybe 5,000 souls after the day of Pentecost there. And they are not considered a people, necessarily a Jew by any means. Verse 9, our scripture lesson ends with this rather striking statement. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. This is not the only place in which the Old Testament made a connection between believing and being established. For an earlier example of this same connection, see 2 Chronicles 20. John P. Milton clarifies that the context of this particular message, the reference is not so much to the faith that is reckoned for righteousness as to the need of faith in God for all of life's experiences. When Jesus saw the faith of the man who brought to him, he praised the man and reacted to the palsied man. He reacted to the faith of the men by giving both physical and spiritual healing to the man who was sick. I made mention of that a few weeks ago, I think myself, how that I certainly heard this on the radio. A man was preaching, said, if you have the faith as a grain of mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, be thou removed into the sea, and it be done. And he was referring to some of these people that said, well, the reason you're not healed is because you don't have faith. He said, well, that mountain don't have faith. It's your faith that moved it. And it's the faith of these poor men that Jesus saw and healed the man with palsy. And there was a couple of things there that he did for that, but sometimes we need to have faith for other people. We can't have the faith to save other people. They got to exercise that themselves, that God has died for their sins. But for healing and for other things to be done, I think we can do that. I think that's what it's giving. Faith led to his being established, which is another way of saying that he was delivered out of his troubles. In every time of need, faith in God is the final place of refuge and source of help. It reminds me, I don't watch this much, or I don't see it much, but that's your final answer. Faith in God is the final answer. It's faith in God. That's the final answer. Ahaz thought that he was making his position stronger by pursuing an alliance with Assyria instead of trusting in the word of the Lord. But instead he was making his position much weaker, as history eventually would prove. Unbelief always leads to defeat, not only on a national level, but also on a personal level. Whenever we begin to take it into our own hands, that's the beginning of defeat. We can't do it. We're just a vessel. We're just an instrument. The more you can see that, the more God can do. Decisions which seem to appear to be practical and even necessary in the heat of the moment can have serious negative consequences when they stem from a failure to believe God's word and rest on his promises. Isaiah recorded this particular event because it was a pivotal moment for the nation of Israel. Ahaz's decision to trust in his own wisdom rather than God's word led his nation in a downward trajectory which ended with the destruction of Jerusalem and the relocation of most of the people to Babylon. And that was a little later. But, and 2 or 3, there was a couple of other kings in between there. Hezekiah, his own son, was a good king. And he was the one that said that he had told the Lord what he'd done. And gave him his credentials, and God sent Isaiah back and said, hey, he's heard you're going to give you 15 more years to live. and so on. But he got a little bit lifted up with it. There were people from Babylon came, and he didn't recognize that they were spies. But and it didn't happen in Hezekiah's day either. But the next king or two it did. This emphasis on faith also demonstrates the continuity between the message of the Old Testament and its ultimate fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ, as revealed in the New Testament. Faith is the central reality of the Lord's people, not just their distinctiveness, but their ground of existence. No faith, no people. And you can put no faith, no people, or what was that other that you had on your shirt? No peace.
Jesus, no peace. And it's spelled out no, but then it also in a different color used the N-O. So it says if you have no Jesus, you have no peace. But if you know Jesus,
if you K-N-O-W, Jesus, then you realize peace. And that's the way this is. And I put down as a closing little thought here, Ahaz chose not to trust God, and it turned out not to be good. Taking a lesson from his mistake, and trust God. In whatever happens, there's so much going on. If I can use myself as an example, I'm saying I don't know. I can't do anything. Man, I'd have to be kind of a rich guy to do everything I need to do. There's not just the car, but there's some other things at the house. There's things that, it's just going to take money. But God can do it, and I don't know how He would do it. It might even be that He's coming to take the church. I don't know. All the signs that you see out there are not necessarily signs that Jesus is coming. Most of what you see is the preparation for the kingdom of the beast. And it is so close to happening. But he, the beast, and those, and his kingdom, the beast will not be revealed and the kingdom not set up before the church and the comforter is taken away. The only reason we know it's close is because the implementation of and the start of the tribulation is that close. It is very close. But trust God. Put your trust in God. And if things work out, as there was, I think we canceled last Wednesday night service or something on account of weather or possibility of weather. So I have a message on trusting that'll go probably with this as well. But so just trust God. Learn from the mistakes of others. I like the ending of that one that I heard. Learn from the mistakes of others. You'll never be able to make them all yourself.